I think that you all know that I encourage our parishioners to attend one of the pastorate parishes when you're not here. And if you weren't here last weekend, if you didn't do that, I hope that they preached about this immigration issue. If they didn't, then they're not paying attention to the Holy Father, the U.S. bishops, or our own bishop here in the Archdiocese of Dubuque. And so it's a real struggle and it's a real challenge, and I continue to be troubled by this, and I hope you are as well, because it's something to which we all need to have something to weigh in on and to be thinking about this. So now we have the executive order, which is supposed to get these kids back together, but if you have been following the news, it isn't working. So there were 200 children flown to New York. No connection between them and their parents. The process for coming into the country legally at this juncture means that people need to be in court. They need to defend why they should remain in the country. There was a news report this week about a 3-year-old in court by herself in front of a judge. And she's supposed to defend why should she stay in this country. It's ludicrous. Oh, we're following the laws, but it's ludicrous. And I remind you that the church has always taught that yes, we need to make sure that we secure our borders and follow the laws that are set, but God's law always supersedes that. And so that's true with abortion. It's okay. It's legal in this country. God's law still supersedes it. So this is another example of that. Again, just so that we don't get too mired down in the present, this is certainly not the first time that we've dealt with this in our country. Take the Native Americans, who were not immigrants, I remind you. And so in our country, we had forced separation of families. They took the kids away from the families and put them in white schools so that they could be assimilated into our culture. That continued to happen until the early 1960s. Just to put that into perspective, over 100,000 Native American children suffered through that. And so we still can kind of struggle with this and say, where do we go with this? Well, one of the things that we should stand on, besides the scriptures, is the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Now, if you don't know anything about that, it's everything you wanted to know about the church, but we're afraid to ask. If you don't have one in your home, you should get one, but you can look it up online. But the Catechism of the Catholic Church has all of our teachings together. And it underscores, when we talk about immigration, really just 2 points. The first one says this, and I'll quote, "The first duty is to welcome the foreigner out of charity and respect for the human person. Persons have the right to immigrate, and thus government needs to accommodate this right to the greatest extent possible, especially financially blessed nations. The more prosperous nations are obliged, to the extent they are able, to welcome foreigner in search of security and the means of a livelihood." The second one is just as important equally. The second duty is to secure one's borders and to enforce the law for the sake of the common good. Sovereign authorities have the right to enforce their laws, and all persons must respect the legitimate exercise of this right. So we have both of those that we hold in tension. But we remind ourselves that human rights are going to supersede our legal and political rights. Somebody said in conversation this week that, well, you know, this is getting very political, and politics shouldn't enter into this. If you know what the word politics means, it comes from the word polis, which means people. And so the Bible is very political in that sense. But we don't stand on politics as Christians. We stand on our theology, what God asks of us. And it's very clear, no matter where you look at in the Scripture, not only is God always on the side of the weak and the vulnerable, we know that because that's who Jesus spent his life with, but Jesus always asks us to do more than the law. So we're always asked to go beyond. So we can't hide behind that by saying, well, this is a law or that is a law. So we need to say, what does that mean in this particular situation? One of the things that I encouraged you to do last week is to continue to educate yourself about this, because there's so much lies being put out there that you and I are supposed to suck down just because it's on a major network. Let me give you one example. So we're being told right now that the immigration numbers are at a crisis level. Get on your computer. You order stuff from Amazon all the time. Get on your computer and look up factcheck.org. Factcheck.org, one word. And one of the things that you'll find out is that the apprehensions at the border, the times that people have been taken in or arrested, in 2000 was over 220,000 people. Do you know what it was this year? Less than 40. This is not at epic proportions. What's happening at epic proportions right now is the reason that people are coming, because of poverty and because they fear for their lives. Now, in last week's bulletin, we had in there a little cartoon about the immigration process, the legal immigration process, and it's really broken. In fact, I talked to one of our senators from Iowa this week, and he said, Father, we get appeals to my office a lot, and he said, it's broken, it doesn't make sense. And I think I told you last week that I talked to a woman in Elkader who emigrated here from Iowa. It took her 10 years to get in, and she was married, she was white, she had kids. So it's not working very well. And as far as those of you who talk about green card and work visas, there are only 5,000 of those issued in the country per year to do the jobs that none of you will do, because you need to get paid more than that. So we have to wrestle with, what does this mean? And so it's not so much an immigration crisis as it is a human rights crisis and what we're called to do about it. I think that as we look at what the ramifications of this are, there's one fact that I'm trying to check out, and I haven't found any information on it yet, but I will. If you figure that most of our people coming to this country are from Central and South America and Mexico, those countries are overwhelmingly Catholic. Not that it would be okay if they were Methodists or Lutherans or Presbyterians or Congregationalists or Christian Scientists, but they're Catholic. And I think that one of the underbellies of this is also that. We as Roman Catholics have worked so hard. You've heard me say this before, and I'll say it again because historically it's true. We have worked so hard to be accepted in this country, to be just like everybody else. Now we are. We don't vote any differently. We don't stand up any differently. We don't do anything any differently. But we were the immigrants in this country at the turn of the century. And we seem to have forgotten that. And so now we hide behind laws that, well, this is happening illegally. I just remind you of the story I told last week about one of our priests from the Archdiocese who tried 3 times with his family to get into our country, and because the system was broken, they did it illegally until they got themselves settled, and then they went through the process and now are American citizens. Again, I suggest to you that there are no easy answers to this. But what you and I cannot afford to do is to have these violent, divisive conversations, attacks on each other. Okay? This country was founded on being able to have a difference of opinion and still being able to have a civil conversation about it. And so we have to be able to move forward on these things without demonizing each other and without calling all kinds of people names or blaming on this administration or that administration. This has been going on for a long time. And so what are people of faith called to do? I read an article written by a priest earlier this week, and I'll put it in the bulletin so that you can look at it next week, because I think it was very well done. But he suggested these steps, these things that we can do, because I don't know about you, but I feel helpless about this in Little Edgewood, Iowa. First of all, he said the first thing we need to do is pray. Everybody can do that, no matter what your heart says, no matter what your political aspirations are, we can pray. And don't just pray for the church in the United States. Pray for the Catholic Church throughout the world. We have been involved in the removal of more dictators than any other denomination. We have been forces for change than any other major denomination. pray for the church that it stays true to the teaching of Christ. So we sing, all are welcome, but it's not just all are welcome if you fit into certain categories. The second thing that we're called to do is act. What does that mean? Well, in the Catholic Church, we talk about the corporal and spiritual works of mercy. We can all do those things. There are people right around here who need our help. Clayton and Delaware counties are great examples of where there's great need. I was talking to somebody the other day who had furniture to get to somebody who they had hardly any furniture in their home, but the people had no way of getting there to get it. And they've been waiting for over a month. So finally, this person got together, some people, and they took a couch and a couple chairs over, and I think a bed. That's right here. That's what's going on here. We have those people here. We need to act. What are things that we can do? That second reading couldn't have been better for this weekend. Paul to the Corinthians said this, talking about Christ, "For though he was rich, for your sake he became poor, so that by his poverty you might become rich. Not that others should have relief while you are burdened, but as a matter of equality, your abundance at the present time should supply their needs, so that their abundance may also supply yours, that there may be equality." That's not a political platform. That's what the Scriptures are telling us. That's what the Scriptures are telling us. And I think about some of these kids as young as 8 months that are now separated from their families with no logical, concrete plan of getting them together. If I've been with parents who have lost kids. Obviously, I've not been a parent. I would be wild. I would be wild. I don't care why they were taken away. They're my kids. How are we going to solve this? I think one of the strongest things that this priest suggested we do is to identify with these people. Christ came to earth to identify with the poor and the marginalized. There's no debating that fact in the Scriptures. And so we think about, gosh, you were parents. Put yourself in those parents' shoes. Where the hell are my kids? Am I ever going to see them again? Identify with those people. Try to figure out what they're feeling. Fifthly, he suggested that we resist. So that means to take greater action. Now, it's not election time, but I think there are other things that we can do to do that. An easy thing is this. We need to have conversations about this, but if you're getting into a conversation with somebody and people are just slogging stuff out, say, where did you get that information? I'd like to know what the resources for that are. Stop that violent conversation. Not only is it uncharitable, it's downright sinful. And all it does is add fuel to the fire. It doesn't help anything, and it sure doesn't give God any glory. The last thing that this priest suggested that we do is probably the hardest. And he said no matter what we do, we need to remember that in the final analysis, the last word is always love. Love one another as I have loved you. Regardless of anything that we've done, Christ loves and accepts and supports us. If we're going to call ourselves disciples of Christ, you and I need to wrestle with what does that mean for me to do that. So I think that as we continue to move forward and have concern about this on a lot of levels, a lot of practical levels, I get that. But I think that each of us need to wrestle with our own conscience about this, because I am not only convinced but convicted in my heart that Christ will be asking us about these things on the last day. He's not going to say you missed a First Friday. He's not going to say you missed 2 Sunday Masses. He's going to say, whatsoever you did to the least of my people, that you did unto me. And I don't know about you, but that haunts me. So we as Catholic Christians need to return to our heritage and also pray for a restoration of the moral authority in our country. that says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness because we are one nation under God. Let's ask for God's help in our hands in this situation. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.